Tonight, beneath a blood moon, Aerin Vale will be torn apart in front of everyone she's ever known. Her destined mate, the one the universe chose for her, will rip their bond to shreds and leave her bleeding on sacred ground. Everyone expects her to fall, to beg, to break. She won't. And that refusal will catch the eye of the most dangerous alpha in existence, a king with a curse, a throne built on fear, and absolutely no intention of falling in love. Stick around until the end to see how a rejected Omega becomes the queen who rewrites destiny. Like this video and drop a comment with your city. Let's see where you're watching from. The ceremony ground smelled like pine smoke and old magic. Aerin Vale stood at the center of the stone circle, her hands trembling despite her best efforts to keep them still. Around her, the entire Silver Peak pack had gathered, hundreds of wolves in human form, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness, all waiting to witness the sacred bonding. The blood moon hung overhead like a wound in the sky. She'd known this night was coming for months, ever since her 21st birthday, when the mate bond had snapped into place with such force it had knocked the breath from her lungs. Kyle Thorne, the pack heir. Strong, handsome, destined to lead. And hers, or so the universe had decided. Except Kyle hadn't looked at her the way the bond insisted he should. He'd looked at her like she was a problem. Now he stood across from her in the circle, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. The pack elders flanked them both, ancient wolves in ceremonial robes, ready to complete the ritual that would bind them forever. Elder Moira raised her hands, her voice carrying across the clearing. Under the blood moon, we gather to witness the sacred bond between Kyle Thorne, heir of Silver Peak, and Aerin Vale, Omega of the Eastern Den. Let the ancestors bear witness. Let the bond be sealed. Aerin's heart hammered. She tried to catch Kyle's eye, but he wouldn't look at her. Something was wrong. Kyle Thorne, Elder Moira continued, do you accept this bond? Do you claim Aerin Vale as your mate, your equal, your— No. The word cut through the air like a blade. Silence crashed down over the clearing. Aerin felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. No? Elder Moira's voice sharpened. Kale, this is not a choice. The bond has chosen— I reject it. Kale's voice was flat, emotionless. I reject her. Aerin's breath stopped. Around them, the pack erupted into whispers, shocked, scandalized, hungry for drama. But Aerin couldn't hear them. All she could hear was the roaring in her ears as Kyle finally met her gaze. His eyes were ice. You're not strong enough, he said quietly. You're not alpha blood. You're barely even beta. I'm going to lead this pack someday, and I need a mate who can stand beside me. Someone powerful. Someone who matters. Each word landed like a fist to the gut. Aerin opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The bond inside her chest twisted, screaming, trying to pull her toward him even as he tore it apart. I, Kyle Thorne, reject you, Aerin Vale, as my mate. The bond snapped. Pain exploded through her body, white-hot, brutal, like every nerve ending was being ripped out at once. Aerin gasped, doubling over, her hands clutching at her chest as if she could hold the pieces together. She felt the bond unraveling inside her, shredding, dying. Someone in the crowd laughed. She looked up, tears streaming down her face, and saw them, dozens of wolves watching her suffer. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked entertained. Kyle turned his back on her. Kyle, Elder Moira's voice cracked like a whip. You cannot simply walk away from— I just did. He didn't even glance back. This ceremony is over. The pain was still tearing through Aerin, wave after wave, but something else rose up beneath it. Something cold and sharp. Rage. She forced herself upright, her legs shaking, her vision blurred. Every instinct screamed at her to collapse, to curl into a ball and let the bond sickness take her. That's what happened to rejected mates. They broke. They withered. Sometimes they died. But Aerin had spent her entire life being told she wasn't enough. Wasn't strong enough. Wasn't alpha enough. Wasn't worth protecting. She'd spent 21 years swallowing that poison, trying to prove herself, trying to earn a place in a pack that barely acknowledged her existence. And she was done. Aerin! Elder Moira's voice softened, pitying. Child, you need to sit down. The bond sickness will— I'm fine. Aerin's voice came out raw but steady. She straightened her spine, wiped the tears from her face, and turned to face the pack. Hundreds of eyes stared back at her, curious, mocking, waiting for her to fall apart. She didn't give them the satisfaction. "I'm fine," she repeated, louder this time. "And I'm leaving." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back called out, "Good riddance!" Aerin ignored them. She walked toward the edge of the circle, each step agony, the bond sickness clawing at her insides. But she kept her head high, her shoulders back, her face carefully blank. She would not beg. She would not break. Not here. Not in front of them. She was almost to the tree line when she felt it. A presence, heavy and absolute, like the weight of a storm rolling in. The air itself seemed to thicken. Aerin stopped, her skin prickling with sudden awareness. And then she saw him. Standing just beyond the torchlight, half hidden in shadow, was a man who didn't belong. Tall. Taller than anyone in Silver Peak, with broad shoulders and a face carved from something harder than stone. His eyes were silver, pale as winter frost, and they were fixed directly on her. Power radiated off him in waves, not the scrappy territorial dominance of a pack alpha, but something older, something vast. Aerin's wolf, still reeling from the broken bond, whimpered and tried to crawl deeper inside her chest. The stranger tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle he was deciding whether to solve. Then he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Well," he said, his voice low and smooth, "that was entertaining." The pack froze. Every wolf in the clearing turned toward the stranger, and Aerin saw recognition flicker across several faces. Recognition and fear. Elder Moira went pale. "Your Majesty." "Your Majesty?" Aerin's mind spun, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. There was only one wolf in the entire realm who carried that title, and he didn't leave his fortress. Ever. He was a myth, a nightmare, the kind of monster parents threatened their children with. Alpha King, Lucien Varric, ruler of the Northern Empire, controller of 12 territories, the most powerful alpha alive. And he was here, at a backwater pack bonding ceremony, watching her. Lucien stepped forward into the torchlight, and the pack instinctively parted for him. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd never had to fight for space in his life. The world simply made room. His gaze never left Aerin. "That was quite the performance," he said, stopping a few feet away from her. Up close, he was even more intimidating, not just physically, but in the way he occupied space, like gravity bent toward him. "Tell me, little Omega, do you always walk away from public humiliation with that much dignity, or was that a special occasion?" Aerin's throat was dry. Her wolf was still whimpering, torn between submission and the urge to run. But she'd already been torn apart tonight. She didn't have anything left to lose. "Who I am," she said quietly, "is none of your business." Lucien's smile widened. Bold. I like that. Behind him, Kael had gone rigid. The pack heir was staring at Lucien with barely concealed fury, and underneath it, fear. "Your Majesty," Kael said carefully, "this is a pack matter. I don't know why you're here, but—" "I'm here," Lucien interrupted, his tone bored, "because I was passing through and smelled something interesting." He looked back at Aerin. "Turns out I was right." Erin's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" Lucien repeated, considering. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I want to offer you a choice, Aerin Vale. You can stay here with your pathetic pack and your worthless ex-mate and spend the rest of your life as a cautionary tale. Or," he paused, his silver eyes glittering, "or you can come with me." Aerin blinked. "What?" "Come with me," Lucien said again, "to the Northern Empire. I need a queen, and you—" His gaze swept over her, assessing, "You're interesting enough to qualify." The world tilted sideways. "A queen?" Erin's voice cracked. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." Lucien glanced back at Kael, dismissive. "I know you're stronger than he gave you credit for. I know you didn't beg. And I know that if you stay here, you'll waste that strength on people who will never appreciate it." Erin's mind was racing. This couldn't be real. Alpha King Lucien Varric didn't show up at random pack ceremonies and offer to marry rejected Omegas. It didn't make sense, unless... "What's the catch?" she asked. Lucien's smile turned sharp. "Smart girl. The catch is simple. I'm not offering you love. I'm offering you power, protection, and a crown. In exchange, you play the part of my queen. You stand beside me, you support my rule, and you don't ask for anything I'm not willing to give." He leaned in slightly. "But you'll be safe, you'll be respected, and no one will ever humiliate you again." It was a cold offer, transactional, brutal in its honesty. And Aerin realized with a strange sort of clarity that she preferred it that way. False promises had gotten her nothing but pain. At least this was honest. "And if I say no?" she asked. Lucien shrugged. "Then you stay here. I leave. And we never speak of this again." Aerin looked back at the pack, at Kael standing stiff and furious, at Elder Moira watching with wide, fearful eyes, at the hundreds of wolves who'd watched her suffer and done nothing. She thought about the bond sickness still gnawing at her insides, the pain that would take weeks to fade. She thought about the Eastern Den, where she'd grown up alone and unwanted. She thought about spending the rest of her life in a place that had never valued her. Then she looked at Lucien Varric, cold, dangerous, offering her a throne she didn't ask for, and a future she couldn't predict. But at least it was something new. At least it was a choice. "Fine," Aerin said. "I'll go with you." Lucien's smile turned almost pleased. "Excellent." He turned to address the pack, his voice carrying effortlessly across the clearing. "Hear me now. Aerin Vale is under my protection. Anyone who touches her, threatens her, or speaks against her will answer to me personally. Consider this a royal decree." Kael took a step forward, his face twisted with anger. "You can't just—" "I can." Lucien's voice dropped into something lethal. "And I did." "Unless you'd like to challenge me for her?" Kael froze. Aerin watched the color drain from his face as he realized what he was up against. There was no challenge, no contest. Lucien Varric was so far above Silver Peak's hierarchy that even thinking about defying him was suicide. Kael backed down. Lucien turned back to Aerin and offered his hand. "Shall we?" Aerin hesitated for just a moment, one last second to change her mind, to choose the familiar pain over the unknown danger. Then she took his hand. His grip was firm, cold, absolute. And together, they walked away from the ceremony ground, leaving the blood moon and the shattered bond and the broken pack behind. The journey to the Northern Empire took 3 days by car, a sleek black vehicle that moved through the wilderness like it owned the roads. Aerin spent most of the trip in silence, staring out the window, watching the landscape shift from forest to mountains to the sprawling, snow-dusted plains of the north. Lucien sat across from her, working on a tablet, occasionally making phone calls in a language she didn't recognize. He barely spoke to her beyond the occasional question about food or rest stops. It should have been uncomfortable. Instead, Aerin found it almost peaceful. No one was demanding anything from her. No one was telling her she wasn't good enough. Lucien had made his terms clear, and now he was just letting her exist. On the third day they arrived. The northern capital was nothing like Silver Peak. Where her old pack had lived in wooden cabins and dirt paths, this was a city, massive, modern, gleaming with glass and steel. Wolves in expensive clothes moved through the streets, their postures confident, their eyes sharp. And at the heart of it all, rising like a blade against the sky, was the palace. It was brutal in its beauty, dark stone and sharp angles, built to intimidate as much as to shelter. Guards flanked every entrance, their eyes tracking Aerin as the car pulled through the gates. "Welcome home," Lucien said dryly. Aerin didn't answer. She couldn't. She was too busy trying not to hyperventilate. Inside, the palace was even more overwhelming. High ceilings, marble floors, walls lined with weapons and tapestries, and portraits of stern-faced alphas who looked like they'd never smiled in their lives. Lucien led her through a maze of hallways until they reached a set of double doors. He pushed them open, revealing a suite of rooms, bedroom, sitting area, private bathroom, decorated in shades of silver and deep blue. "This is yours," he said. "My rooms are down the hall. We'll share public spaces, but your private quarters are yours alone. No one enters without your permission." Aerin stepped inside, her fingers brushing over the soft fabric of the couch. It was nicer than anything she'd ever owned. "There's a formal dinner tonight," Lucian continued. "You'll meet the court. They'll have questions. Ignore most of them. Just smile, nod, and let me handle the politics." Aerin turned to face him. "And what am I supposed to tell them? About us?" "The truth." Lucian's expression didn't change. "That you're my chosen queen. That we're bound by mutual interest, not sentiment. They don't need to know the details. And if they ask why you chose me, then I'll tell them it's none of their concern." Lucian moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. There are rules here. Learn them. Follow them. And don't mistake my protection for softness, Aerin. I'm not your savior. I'm your king. Remember that." He left before she could respond. Aerin stood alone in her new rooms, her heart pounding, and wondered what the hell she'd just agreed to. The dinner was a nightmare. Aerin had been dressed by a team of attendants who'd appeared without warning and transformed her into something unrecognizable. Hair pinned up, makeup carefully applied, a gown that fit like it had been made for someone else. She didn't recognize herself in the mirror. The dining hall was massive, filled with long tables and glittering chandeliers and what felt like hundreds of wolves, alphas, betas, advisors, all dressed in finery, all watching her with sharp, calculating eyes. Lucian sat at the head of the table, and Aerin had been placed at his right hand, the seat of honor, the seat everyone was staring at. "Smile," Lucian murmured without looking at her. "You look like you're about to be executed." "I feel like I am," Aerin muttered back. Across the table, a woman with silver hair and cold eyes leaned forward. "Your Majesty, you must introduce us to your guest." "Lady Corinne," Lucian said smoothly, "this is Aerin Vale, my future queen." The table erupted into whispers. Lady Corinne's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How delightful! And where, may I ask, does she come from?" "Silver Peak Pack," Lucian said. More whispers. Aerin saw the judgment in their faces. Silver Peak was small, insignificant, barely worth acknowledging. "I see," Lady Corinne said slowly. "And what makes her qualified to rule beside you, Your Majesty?" Lucian's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Are you questioning my judgment, Corinne?" Lady Corinne paled. "Of course not, Your Majesty. I merely—" "Then we're done here." Lucian picked up his wine glass. "To my future queen." The court echoed the toast, but Aerin could feel the resentment simmering beneath the surface. She'd been here less than a day, and she'd already made enemies. The dinner dragged on for hours, course after course, conversation after conversation, all of it sharp and political and exhausting. Aerin barely spoke, letting Lucian handle the questions, the challenges, the barely veiled hostility. When it was finally over, she escaped back to her rooms and collapsed onto the bed, still wearing the ridiculous gown. A knock at the door made her groan. "Go away," she called. The door opened anyway. Lucian stepped inside, his jacket discarded, his tie loosened. He looked almost human like this, tired, a little rumpled. "You survived," he said. "Barely." Aerin sat up. "Your court hates me. They don't trust you. That's different." Lucian crossed to the window, staring out at the city lights. "Give them time. Or don't. Their opinion doesn't matter. It matters if they're the ones I have to live with." "You live with me," Lucian corrected. "The court is background noise." Aerin studied him, this cold, powerful alpha who dragged her into his world without asking if she was ready. "Why did you really choose me?" Lucian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because you walked away." "What?" "At the ceremony." He turned to face her. "When that idiot rejected you, you could have collapsed, begged, made a scene. Instead, you stood up and walked away like it didn't matter. Like he didn't matter." "It hurt," Aerin said quietly. "I know." Lucian's eyes met hers. "But you didn't let them see it. That's strength, Aerin. Real strength. The kind most wolves spend their entire lives pretending to have." Aerin didn't know what to say to that. Lucian moved toward the door. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start planning the coronation." He left, and Aerin was alone again. She lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and tried to figure out if she'd made the best decision of her life or the worst. Only time would tell. The coronation was scheduled for 3 weeks out, which gave the court exactly 21 days to make Aerin's life hell. It started small. Whispers that followed her through the palace corridors, servants who took too long to respond to requests, invitations to court functions that never quite reached her door. Nothing overt enough to complain about, but constant enough to make her feel like an intruder in her own home. Lucien noticed, but he didn't interfere. "You're going to be queen," he'd said one morning over breakfast, not even looking up from his reports. "If you can't handle court politics, you won't survive the real threats." Aerin had wanted to throw her coffee at him. Instead, she'd smiled tightly and said, "I'll manage." She was learning that Lucien's version of protection meant keeping her alive, not making her comfortable. He'd given her a title, a crown, and a target on her back. And now he expected her to figure out how to wear all three. The first real test came on her 5th day in the palace. Aerin had been summoned to the council chamber, a massive room dominated by a circular table where Lucien's advisors gathered to discuss matters of state. She'd assumed it was a formality, a chance for her to observe how the empire actually functioned. She was wrong. Lady Corinne stood at the head of the table when Aerin entered, her silver hair perfectly styled, her expression pleasant in a way that made Aerin's skin crawl. "Ah, Miss Vale," Corinne said sweetly. "How kind of you to join us." Aerin glanced around the room. A dozen council members watched her with varying degrees of interest and hostility. Lucien sat at the far end of the table, his expression unreadable. "I was told this meeting was mandatory," Aerin said carefully. "Of course." Corinne gestured to an empty chair. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." Aerin sat, every instinct screaming that this was a trap. Corinne didn't waste time. "We've been reviewing the details of the upcoming coronation, and several concerns have been raised. Given that you'll be representing the Northern Empire on the world stage, it's imperative that you understand our customs, our history, and our expectations." "I'm learning," Aerin said. "Are you?" Corinne's smile sharpened. "Then perhaps you can tell us about the Treaty of Black Summit. When was it signed, and which territories were involved?" Aerin's mind went blank. She'd been reading through the palace archives every night, but 3 weeks wasn't enough time to memorize centuries of political history. I don't know the exact date," she admitted. Murmurs rippled around the table. "I see." Corinne folded her hands. "And what about the Lunar Accords? Surely you're familiar with those." "No?" "The structure of the regional councils?" "I'm still studying. The names of our allied pacts?" "Lady Corinne." Lucien's voice cut through the interrogation like a blade. "What exactly is the purpose of this exercise?" Corinne turned to him, all innocence. "Your Majesty, I'm simply ensuring that your future queen is prepared for her duties. The coronation is in 3 weeks, and she knows nothing about our empire. How can she possibly represent us if she doesn't understand?" "She'll learn what she needs to learn," Lucien said flatly. "This meeting is over." "But, Your Majesty—" "Over." Lucien stood, his eyes cold. "Aerin, with me." Aerin followed him out of the council chamber, her face burning with humiliation. Behind her, she could hear the council members whispering, their voices dripping with satisfaction. Lucien didn't speak until they were alone in a side corridor. "That was a setup," he said. "I noticed." Aerin's hands were shaking. "They wanted to make me look incompetent. They succeeded." Aerin flinched. "Thanks for the support." "I'm not here to coddle you." Lucien turned to face her, his expression hard. "Corinne is testing you. The entire court is testing you. They want to see if you'll break under pressure, if you'll run back to whatever hole you crawled out of." "I didn't crawl out of anywhere," Aerin snapped. "You dragged me here." "And you agreed to come." Lucien stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You wanted power, Aerin. You wanted protection. This is what it costs. If you can't handle a few hostile questions, how are you going to handle an assassination attempt?" Aerin's blood ran cold. "Assassination? You think everyone in this palace is happy about your sudden elevation?" Lucien's voice was deadly quiet. "Half the court wanted me to marry one of their daughters. The other half wanted me to stay single so they could keep maneuvering for influence. You're a threat to all of them." Then why bring me here at all? Because I needed someone who didn't come with attachments. Someone who didn't have a dozen power-hungry relatives trying to control them. Someone, he paused, someone who could survive. Aerin stared at him, her heart pounding. You think I can survive this? I think you're tougher than you look. Lucien's expression softened, just barely. But you need to stop trying to be perfect. They'll never accept you as one of them, so stop pretending. Be something else. Be something they can't categorize. Like what? Lucien's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. Like yourself. He walked away, leaving Aerin alone in the corridor with the weight of his words pressing down on her shoulders. That night, Aerin made a decision. If the court wanted to test her knowledge, she'd give them something they couldn't prepare for. She started by raiding the palace library, a massive room filled floor to ceiling with books, scrolls, and ancient texts. Most of it was dry political history, treaties and trade agreements and genealogies of long-dead alphas. But buried in the back, behind the official records, she found something else. Stories. Not the sanitized histories that made it into the official archives, but the raw, unfiltered accounts of how the Northern Empire had actually been built. Tales of betrayal and bloodshed, of alphas who'd clawed their way to power through brutality and cunning. The kind of stories the court probably wished everyone would forget. Aerin read until her eyes burned, taking notes, memorizing names and connections, and the dirty secrets that never made it into polite conversation. If they wanted to play games, she'd learn the rules they didn't talk about. 2 days later, at another council meeting, Lady Corinne tried again. Miss Vale, she said, her tone syrupy, I understand you've been spending time in the library. How educational. Perhaps you can share what you've learned. Aerin met her gaze steadily. I'd be happy to. I've been reading about the founding of House Varric. Fascinating stuff. Corinne's smile faltered slightly. Oh? Yes. Particularly the account of how Lucien's great-great-grandfather secured the Northern Territories. Aerin leaned back in her chair, keeping her voice casual. He poisoned 3 rival alphas at a peace summit, framed a 4th for the murders, and then married the widow of the 5th to consolidate power. Very efficient. The room went dead silent. Corinne's face had gone white. Those are unsubstantiated rumors. Are they? Aerin pulled out a piece of paper. Because I found the original correspondence in the restricted archives. Letters between House Varric and House Morven, detailing the entire plan. Very thorough record-keeping, actually. At the end of the table, Lucien was staring at her with something that might have been amusement. The point, Aerin continued, is that this empire wasn't built on politeness and proper etiquette. It was built on ruthlessness. So if you're worried I don't understand Northern politics, Lady Corinne, let me assure you, I understand perfectly. She stood, meeting the eyes of every council member in turn. I'm not here to play by your rules. I'm here because your king chose me, and if that bothers you, I suggest you take it up with him. She walked out before anyone could respond. Behind her, she heard someone laugh, a short, sharp sound quickly stifled. Later in his private study, Lucien poured her a drink without being asked. That was reckless, he said. You told me to be myself. I didn't tell you to threaten the entire council. I didn't threaten anyone. Aerin accepted the glass. I just reminded them that this family has a history of dealing with problems efficiently. Lucien's eyes gleamed. You've been studying. You said I needed to survive. I'm learning how. Good. He raised his own glass. But understand something, Aerin. What you did today made you enemies, powerful ones. Corinne won't forgive being embarrassed in front of the council. I don't need her forgiveness. No, Lucien agreed. But you do need to watch your back. The first attempt came 3 days later. Aerin had been walking through the palace gardens, a rare moment of peace in an otherwise suffocating routine, when she'd noticed the servant following her, young, nervous, carrying a silver tray with a covered dish. Miss Vale, the girl said, hurrying to catch up. Lady Corinne sent this for you, a traditional northern delicacy, as a gesture of goodwill. Aerin stopped, every instinct screaming danger. Lady Corinne sent me food? Yes, miss. She wanted to apologize for any misunderstandings. Aerin studied the covered dish. It smelled fine. Herbs and roasted meat, nothing obviously wrong. But Corinne didn't strike her as the apologizing type. "What's your name?" Aerin asked. The girl blinked. "Mira, miss." "How long have you worked here, Mira?" 3 months. "And Lady Corinne asked you specifically to deliver this?" Mira nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "She said it was important that you receive it fresh." Aerin took the tray, keeping her expression neutral. "Thank you, Mira. I appreciate it." The girl bobbed a curtsy and fled. Aerin carried the tray back to her room, set it on the table, and stared at it for a long moment. Then she called for the palace physician. Dr. Van arrived within minutes, a sharp-eyed beta with gray hair and no patience for nonsense. "You think it's poisoned," he said flatly, eyeing the covered dish. "I think it's suspicious." Van uncovered the dish and spent several minutes examining the food, running tests, checking for discoloration and unusual smells. Finally, he straightened. "Wolfsbane extract," he said. "Mixed into the sauce, enough to make you violently ill, possibly kill you if you ate the whole portion." Aerin's stomach turned. "Corinne tried to poison me." "Lady Corinne gave the food to a servant to deliver," Ven corrected. "Legally, there's no proof she knew what was in it. The servant could have tampered with it, or someone in the kitchen, or a dozen other possibilities." "But you don't believe that?" "No," Ven said simply. "But believing and proving are different things." Aerin stared at the poisoned food, her mind racing. This wasn't just court politics anymore. This was an actual attempt on her life, and everyone would pretend it was an accident, a mistake, a tragic misunderstanding, unless she forced them to acknowledge it. "Take this to the king," Aerin said. "Tell him exactly what you found." Ven raised an eyebrow. "You want to escalate this?" "I want to survive this." Lucian's response was swift and brutal. Within an hour, every servant who'd had contact with the food was questioned. The kitchen staff was interrogated, and Lady Corinne was summoned to the king's private chambers. Aerin wasn't supposed to be there, but she'd positioned herself just outside the door, close enough to hear every word. "Your Majesty." Corinne's voice was smooth, unconcerned. "I'm told there was an issue with the meal I sent to Miss Vale. How unfortunate. I hope she's unharmed." "The food was poisoned." Lucian's voice was ice. "Wolfsbane extract." "How terrible. One of the kitchen staff must have made an error. I'll see to it that they're—" "Don't!" The word cracked like a whip. "Don't insult my intelligence, Corinne. We both know exactly what this was." A pause. Then, "Your Majesty, if you're suggesting that I would attempt to harm your future queen—" "I'm not suggesting. I'm stating a fact." "Then prove it." Corinne's voice turned cold. "You have no evidence? No witnesses? Nothing but circumstantial suspicion? Even if you stripped me of my title, the council would demand proof. And you can't provide it." She was right, and they both knew it. "You're correct," Lucian said quietly. "I can't prove it was you, but I can make sure you understand the consequences of trying again." "Your Majesty, if anything happens to Aerin, if she trips on the stairs, if she catches a cold, if she so much as gets a paper cut, I will assume you're responsible, and I will respond accordingly." "That's unreasonable. That's reality." Lucian's voice dropped into something inhuman. "Test me, Corinne. See what happens." Footsteps approached the door. Aerin barely had time to duck into a side corridor before Corinne swept out, her face twisted with rage. She didn't see Aerin watching from the shadows. That night, Aerin couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the conversation, Corinne's confidence, Lucian's threats. The poisoned food sat like a weight in her mind, proof that this wasn't a game anymore, that the court's hostility had teeth. Around midnight, there was a soft knock at her door. Aerin grabbed the knife she'd started keeping under her pillow and approached carefully. "Who is it?" "It's me." "Lucien." She opened the door, still holding the knife. He glanced at it, his expression unreadable. "Good," he said. "You're learning." "What do you want?" "To talk." He stepped inside without waiting for permission, moving to the window. "You handled the poison well. Calling Ven, reporting it immediately, that was smart." "I'm trying not to die." "It's more than that." Lucian turned to face her. Most wolves in your position would have hidden it. Been too scared of making waves, of causing problems. You went straight for the throat. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. He was quiet for a moment. You're not what I expected, Aerin. What did you expect? Someone weaker, someone easier to control. His silver eyes met hers. Someone who would do what they were told and be grateful for the opportunity. Sorry to disappoint. You didn't. Lucien's mouth curved slightly. You surprised me. That doesn't happen often. Aerin didn't know what to say to that. The knife was still in her hand, and she was suddenly very aware that they were alone, in her bedroom, in the middle of the night. Why are you really here? She asked. Lucien hesitated just for a second, but it was there. To make sure you understand what you're up against. Corinne won't try poison again, but she'll find other ways. And she's not the only threat in this palace. I know that. Do you? He stepped closer. Because you're acting like this is a fight you can win through cleverness alone. But sooner or later, someone's going to come at you with a blade instead of politics. And when that happens, you need to be ready. I can defend myself. Can you? Lucien's gaze dropped to the knife in her hand. Have you ever actually killed someone, Aerin? The question hung in the air between them. No, she admitted. Then you're not ready. Lucien moved past her, heading for the door. Tomorrow morning you start training, combat, strategy, survival skills. If you're going to survive this court, you need to be more than clever. You need to be dangerous. He left before she could argue. Aerin stood alone in her room, gripping the knife, and wondered if she'd ever be dangerous enough to survive the world she'd walked into. The training started at dawn. Lucien had assigned her to Commander Thane, the head of the Royal Guard, a scarred, grizzled alpha who looked like he'd been carved out of granite and left in the sun to harden. So you're the Omega who thinks she can be queen, Thane said, circling her like a predator. They were in the training yard, a brutal expanse of packed dirt and weapons racks. Let's see what you've got. He didn't give her time to prepare. He lunged. Aerin barely dodged, stumbling backward as Thane's fist whistled past her face. She tried to counter, but he was already moving, sweeping her legs out from under her. She hit the ground hard. The breath knocked from her lungs. Dead, Thane said flatly. Get up. Aerin forced herself upright, her ribs aching. Again, Thane ordered. They went again. And again. And again. By the end of the first hour, Aerin was bruised, bleeding from a split lip, and furious. Thane hadn't held back even slightly, treating her like she was any other recruit. You're slow, he said, not even winded. Your instincts are decent, but you hesitate. Hesitation gets you killed. I'm trying. Try harder. Thane tossed her a training knife. Attack me. Aerin caught the blade, her hands shaking from exhaustion. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to stop, to rest, to give up. She attacked anyway. Thane disarmed her in 3 moves, but this time she didn't stay down. She rolled to her feet, grabbed a staff from the weapons rack, and swung for his knees. He blocked, but she saw surprise flicker across his face. Better, he said. Again. They trained until noon, when Thane finally called a halt. Aerin collapsed onto a bench, her entire body trembling, sweat soaking through her clothes. You'll do, Thane said, which might have been the closest thing to praise she'd get from him. Same time tomorrow. Don't be late. He walked away, leaving Aerin gasping for breath and wondering if she'd survive long enough to reach the coronation. The next 2 weeks blurred together in a brutal routine. Training with Thane at dawn, council meetings and court functions during the day, studying late into the night. Aerin's body was covered in bruises, her mind crammed with treaties and histories and the names of wolves she'd probably never meet. But she was learning. More importantly, she was changing. The Omega who'd arrived 3 weeks ago, broken, uncertain, still reeling from rejection, was gone. In her place was someone harder. Someone who didn't flinch when Lady Corinne sneered at her across the dining table, who could hold her own in a fight, who understood that power wasn't given, it was taken. Lucien noticed. You're moving differently, he said one evening, watching her spar with Thane, more confident. Thane says I'm still too slow. Thane says that to everyone. Lucien's gaze tracked her movements. But you're learning. That's what matters. Aerin landed a hit on Thane's shoulder, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to prove she could reach him. The commander grunted approval. "The coronation is in 3 days," Lucian continued. "After that, you'll be untouchable. Queen of the Northern Empire, protected by law and tradition. But until then, I'm still a target." "Yes." Aerin blocked another strike from Thane, her muscles burning. "I can handle it." "I believe you." Lucian's voice was quiet. "That's the problem." Aerin glanced at him, confused, but he was already walking away. The second attempt came the night before the coronation. Aerin had been in her rooms, reviewing the ceremonial vows she'd have to recite, when she'd heard glass shatter in the hallway. She'd grabbed her knife, always within reach now, and moved toward the door. A shadow slipped past her window. Erin's heart kicked into overdrive. She backed away from the door, her mind racing. Someone was in the palace, someone who shouldn't be. The door handle turned slowly. Aerin pressed herself against the wall, knife raised, every nerve screaming. The door opened a crack, and a figure slid inside, hooded, masked, moving with predatory grace. An assassin. Aerin didn't think. She lunged. The assassin spun, catching her wrist, twisting the knife away. But Aerin had trained for this. She dropped her weight, broke the grip, and drove her elbow into the attacker's ribs. They grunted, stumbling back. Aerin grabbed a lamp from the bedside table and smashed it across their head. The assassin dropped, but not before grabbing her ankle and dragging her down. They hit the floor together, rolling, fighting for position. The assassin's hand closed around her throat, squeezing, and Aerin felt panic surge through her veins. She couldn't breathe. Her vision started to darken. Then she remembered Thane's voice. "Hesitation gets you killed." Aerin stopped trying to pry the hands away from her throat. Instead, she drove her thumb into the assassin's eye socket, hard and brutal. They screamed, releasing her. Aerin rolled away, gasping, and grabbed the fallen knife. When the assassin lunged again, she was ready. The blade sank into their shoulder, not a killing blow, but enough to stop them. The door burst open. Guards flooded in, followed by Lucian, his eyes blazing silver with rage. "Take them," he ordered, his voice deadly calm. "I want answers. Now!" The guards dragged the wounded assassin away. Lucian turned to Aerin, his gaze raking over her bruised throat, her bleeding knuckles, the knife still clutched in her hand. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "I'm fine," Aerin managed, her voice raw. "You're not fine. You were almost killed." "But I wasn't." Aerin met his eyes. "I fought back." Something flickered across Lucian's face. Surprise, maybe. Or something closer to pride. "Yes," he said quietly. "You did." He reached out, his fingers brushing her throat where bruises were already forming. The touch was gentle, almost tender, so at odds with everything else about him that Aerin froze. "This can't happen again," Lucian said, his voice rough. "I can't." He stopped, pulling back. "After tomorrow, you'll have a full security detail. No one will get close to you." "Who sent them?" Aerin asked. "We'll find out." Lucian's expression hardened. "And then I'll destroy them." He left, taking the guards with him, and Aerin was alone with the adrenaline crash, the shaking hands, the realization that she'd just killed someone, or almost killed them. Close enough. She'd crossed a line tonight, become the kind of person who could drive a knife into another living being without hesitation. The kind of person who could survive in Lucian's world. And the terrifying part was, she wasn't sure she regretted it. Eat Bont. The coronation dawned cold and clear, the sky a brilliant winter blue that seemed wrong for what was about to happen. Aerin stood in her chambers, being dressed by silent attendants, and tried not to think about the bodies they'd found that morning. 2 more guards, throats slit, left as a message. The assassin had talked under interrogation, but the name they'd given was a dead end, a hired blade with no loyalty to anyone. Someone powerful wanted her dead. And in a few hours, she'd be standing in front of the entire court, exposed and vulnerable, wearing a crown that made her an even bigger target. "You're ready," one of the attendants murmured, stepping back. Aerin looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger, regal in a gown of silver and midnight blue, her hair woven with diamonds, her throat covered by a high collar that hid the bruises. She looked like a queen. She didn't feel like one. A knock at the door. Lucien entered without waiting, already dressed in his ceremonial armor, every inch the conquering king. He stopped when he saw her. "You look, He paused, something unreadable crossing his face. "You look like you belong here." Aerin turned to face him. "Do I?" "I don't know." Lucien crossed the room, stopping in front of her. 3 weeks ago, I thought you'd break within a month, that you'd beg to go back to your pack, back to the simple life you knew." "I can't go back," Aerin said quietly. "That life is gone." "I know." Lucien reached up, adjusting the collar of her gown with unexpected gentleness. "And I'm not sure if I saved you or damned you." "Why does it matter?" "Because—" He stopped, his hand still at her throat. "Because it matters." For a moment they stood like that, close enough to touch, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Then Lucien stepped back, the moment breaking. "It's time," he said. Together, they walked toward the throne room, toward the crown waiting to be placed on her head, toward a future neither of them could predict. And Aerin realized with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The throne room stretched before them like the mouth of some ancient beast, all sharp edges and cold stone, lit by 1,000 candles that threw dancing shadows across walls hung with the banners of conquered territories. Every seat was filled, every eye turned toward the massive doors as they opened. Erin's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her spine straight, her chin up, her hand steady on Lucien's arm as they walked forward. The crowd parted like water, nobles and alphas and dignitaries from a dozen kingdoms stepping back to let them pass. She could feel their judgment like a physical weight. See it in the curl of their lips, the narrowing of their eyes, the whispered words hidden behind jeweled hands. Omega, weakling, pretender. Let them think what they wanted. In 5 minutes, she'd be their queen, whether they liked it or not. The throne sat at the far end of the hall, carved from black stone, massive and brutal, built to make anyone who sat in it look small. Beside it stood a second throne, smaller but no less imposing, empty and waiting. For her. Elder Matthias stood between the thrones, ancient and gray, his face carved into permanent disapproval. He'd made his opinion of Aerin clear from the start. She was an insult to tradition, a stain on the sacred bloodline, everything wrong with the modern world. But even he couldn't refuse a king's direct order. Lucien led her up the steps, released her arm, and took his place on the black throne. Aerin stood alone before the crowd, exposed and vulnerable, wearing a crown that hadn't been placed yet. "People of the Northern Empire," Elder Matthias began, his voice carrying through the hall, "we are gathered to witness the coronation of Aerin Vale, chosen by King Lucien Varric to rule beside him as queen." Silence. Not the respectful kind, the hostile kind. Matthias continued, droning through the traditional vows, the sacred oaths, the binding promises that would tie Aerin to the throne forever. She repeated the words mechanically, her mind half-focused on the crowd, watching for movement, for the glint of a blade, for anything that suggested another assassination attempt. But nothing came. Finally, Matthias lifted the crown, a delicate thing of silver and diamonds that looked fragile enough to shatter. He held it above Erin's head, his hands shaking slightly with age or rage or both. "Do you, Aerin Vale, swear to protect this empire with your life? To serve its people with honor? To stand beside your king until death claims you?" Aerin met his eyes. "I do." The crown settled onto her head, cold and heavy. "Then by the authority of the throne and the will of the king, I pronounce you Queen of the Northern Empire. May your reign be—" The doors exploded inward. Aerin spun, her hand instinctively reaching for a weapon she wasn't wearing as armed wolves flooded into the throne room. Not assassins this time, soldiers wearing the colors of House Morven, one of the Empire's most powerful vassal families. At their head strode Lord Castor Morven himself, a massive alpha with a scarred face and eyes like chips of flint. He stopped in the center of the hall, 50 armed men at his back, and looked directly at Lucien. "Forgive the interruption, Your Majesty," Castor said, his voice dripping with false courtesy. But I'm afraid I can't allow this coronation to continue." The room erupted into chaos, shouts, gasps, the scrape of chairs as nobles scrambled away from the armed soldiers. Lucian rose from his throne, his face carved from ice, his eyes blazing silver. "You dare bring armed men into my throne room?" His voice was deadly quiet, but it cut through the noise like a blade. "You dare threaten your king?" "I'm not threatening you, Your Majesty." Castor smiled, cold and sharp. "I'm saving you from her." He pointed at Aerin. "This Omega," Castor continued, addressing the crowd now, "is not what she appears. 3 weeks ago, King Lucian found her at a backwater pact ceremony, freshly rejected by her mate, broken and desperate. He took pity on her, or so we thought, but the truth is far more dangerous." Aerin's blood ran cold. She felt Lucian tense beside her, saw his hand move toward the weapon at his hip. "Explain yourself," Lucian said, his voice lethal. "Quickly." Castor gestured, and one of his men stepped forward carrying a leather satchel. He dumped the contents onto the floor. Documents, photographs, what looked like medical records. "Aerin Vale is not just an Omega," Castor announced. "She's a bloodweaver." The word hit the crowd like a physical blow. Gasps turned to screams, nobles backing away from Aerin as if she carried plague. Aerin's mind spun. Bloodweaver. The term was ancient, forbidden, a name for wolves who could manipulate life force itself, who could heal or kill with a touch, whose power was so dangerous they'd been hunted to extinction centuries ago. "That's impossible," Elder Matthias breathed. "The Bloodweaver line was wiped out." "Was it?" Castor picked up one of the documents. "These are medical records from Silver Peak Pack. Tests run when Aerin was a child, showing anomalous healing ability, energy signatures that didn't match any known wolf variant. The Pack Elders sealed the results and suppressed her power, hoping she'd never discover what she was." He looked at Aerin, his expression almost pitying. "They were protecting you, girl, because if anyone found out what you could do, you'd become the most valuable and most dangerous weapon in existence. Every kingdom in the realm would kill to possess you, or kill to prevent anyone else from possessing you." Aerin couldn't breathe. Her hands were shaking, her vision tunneling. This had to be a lie. Some elaborate scheme to discredit her, to stop the coronation. But deep down, in a place she'd never let herself examine too closely, something stirred. A whisper of recognition, of truth she'd been running from her entire life. "You're lying," Lucian said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Bloodweavers are extinct. This is a fabrication designed to—" "Then let her prove it." Castor drew a knife and slashed it across his own palm, blood welling up instantly. He walked toward Aerin, holding out his bleeding hand. "If she's not a bloodweaver, she won't be able to heal this. Simple as that." "Don't touch her," Lucian snarled, moving to intercept. But Aerin stepped forward, her mind strangely calm despite the chaos. "It's fine." "Aerin, if it proves he's lying, it's fine." She looked at Castor's bleeding palm, at the crowd watching with horrified fascination, at Lucian's face twisted with something she couldn't name. Then she reached out and touched the wound. Power surged through her like lightning. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't controlled. It was a tsunami of raw energy that had been locked inside her for 21 years, suddenly freed, suddenly demanding to be used. Aerin gasped, trying to pull back, but the power wouldn't let her. It wanted to heal. Light blazed from her hands. Brilliant white, almost blinding, and Castor jerked back with a startled curse. When the light faded, his palm was smooth and unmarked, the wound completely gone. The throne room went silent. Aerin stared at her hands, trembling, glowing faintly with residual power. Around her, the crowd backed away like she was a live grenade. "She's a monster," someone whispered. "Abomination," another voice hissed. Elder Matthias stumbled backward, his face gray with shock. "This is forbidden. The old laws are clear. Bloodweavers cannot be allowed to live, cannot be allowed to—" "Shut up!" Lucian's voice cracked like a whip. He moved to Aerin's side, placing himself between her and the crowd. "All of you, shut up!" But the damage was done. Aerin could see it in their faces. The fear, the hatred, the absolute conviction that she was something unnatural, something that needed to be destroyed. "Your Majesty," Castor said carefully, You understand what this means. She's too dangerous to be queen, too dangerous to live freely. The old laws are ash, Lucian interrupted, and I am king. If I say she's queen, she's queen. Even if it destroys your empire, Castor's voice hardened. Because it will. Every kingdom in the realm will see this as a threat. They'll unite against you, against her, and will be torn apart in the crossfire. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Nobles nodding, advisors whispering urgently to one another. Aerin could see the calculation in their eyes, weighing loyalty to their king against fear of what she represented. Then they can try, Lucian said, and I'll destroy anyone who threatens what's mine. Castor shook his head slowly. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, but I can't let you make this mistake. He raised his hand. 50 swords drew in unison, the sound like death whispering through the hall. This is treason, Lucian said quietly, dangerously. This is survival. Castor met his gaze without flinching. I'm taking her into custody, for the safety of the Empire, for the stability of the realm. You can fight me, Your Majesty, and lose half your court in the process, or you can let her go. Your choice. Aerin felt Lucien's hand close around her wrist, tight enough to bruise. She could feel the rage radiating off him, the barely controlled violence. He was calculating odds, weighing outcomes, trying to find a way to win without tearing his empire apart, and realizing there wasn't one. No, Aerin said quietly. Lucian looked at her, startled. I'll go with them, Aerin continued, raising her voice so the entire room could hear. Peacefully. No fighting, no bloodshed. But I want one thing in return. Castor's eyes narrowed. What? 7 days. Aerin met his gaze steadily. Give me 7 days to prove I'm not a threat. Let me show all of you, that I can control this power, that I'm not some monster from the old stories. If I can't, she swallowed hard. If I can't, I'll submit to whatever judgment you pass. Absolutely not, Lucian said. Aerin, don't. 7 days, Aerin repeated, ignoring him. That's all I'm asking. Castor considered, his expression unreadable. Around him his soldiers waited, weapons ready, eyes locked on Aerin like she might explode at any moment. Finally, he nodded. 7 days. But you'll be confined to the lower vaults, guarded, isolated, under constant watch. And if you lose control even once, he let the threat hang unfinished. I understand. Aerin, no. Lucian's grip on her wrist tightened. I can fight this. I can. And how many people die? Aerin turned to face him, meeting those silver eyes that had seen too much, promised too little. How many of your soldiers, your court, your people? Because he's right. If you fight this, the Empire tears itself apart, and I won't be responsible for that. You think I care about it? I know you do. Aerin pulled her wrist free, gently but firmly. You're a good king, Lucienne, even if you're a terrible person. Don't destroy everything you've built because of me. Something cracked in Lucian's expression, something raw and painful that he immediately tried to bury. But Aerin saw it, saw the moment he realized she was right, that fighting would cost more than surrendering, that sometimes being king meant making choices that ripped you apart. 7 days, he said, his voice rough. He looked at Castor. And if she proves herself, this is over. No more challenges, no more questions. She's queen, and anyone who disagrees can face me personally. Agreed, Castor said. 2 of his soldiers stepped forward, flanking Aerin. She didn't resist as they took her arms, didn't look back as they led her away from the throne, the crown, the life she'd barely started living. The last thing she saw before the doors closed was Lucian, standing alone on the steps, watching her go with an expression that might have been anguish, or might have been relief. The lower vaults were exactly what they sounded like, a maze of stone cells carved deep beneath the palace, cold and damp and utterly lightless without the torches mounted in iron brackets along the walls. Aerin's cell was small, barely 10 feet square, with a thin mattress on the floor and a bucket in the corner, home for the next 7 days. The guards locked her inside and left without a word. Aerin sat on the mattress, her back against the wall, and tried to process what had just happened. She was a blood weaver. The words felt foreign, impossible, like trying to claim she was secretly royalty or descended from dragons. But the power she'd felt when healing Castor's hand, that surge of energy, that absolute certainty, that had been real, which meant everything she thought she knew about herself was wrong. Time moved strangely in the vault. Without windows or natural light, Aerin couldn't tell if hours or days were passing. Guards brought her food at irregular intervals, plain bread and water, nothing that could be weaponized, and otherwise left her alone. Alone with her thoughts, alone with the power coiled inside her, restless and waiting. She tried to ignore it at first, tried to push it down, lock it away, pretend it didn't exist, but it wouldn't be ignored. On what she thought was the second day, Aerin cut her finger on a rough edge of the stone wall, a small wound barely worth noticing. She watched blood well up, watched it drip onto the floor, and felt the power stir, hungry and insistent. Heal it, something whispered in the back of her mind. Use me. Aerin clenched her fist, resisting, but the power pushed harder, building pressure inside her skull like a headache that wouldn't quit. Finally, she gave in. She touched the cut, and light blazed from her palm, smaller this time, more controlled, but still undeniably there. The wound sealed instantly, skin knitting together like it had never been broken. Aerin stared at her unmarked finger, her heart racing. She could heal. Actually, genuinely heal, with nothing but will and touch. What else could she do? Over the next few days, or what felt like days, Aerin experimented. Small things at first. Healing bruises from the training sessions with Thane, which had barely started to fade. Knitting together a tear in her sleeve. Once, in a moment of desperation, she'd tried to sense the life force of a rat that had wandered into her cell. She'd felt it, a tiny spark of energy, fragile and quick. And for a terrifying second, she'd felt the power reach toward it, wanting to snuff it out, wanting to take that energy for itself. Aerin had pulled back so fast she'd nearly passed out. Healing was one thing, killing was another entirely. On what she thought was the fifth day, the door to her cell opened and someone unexpected stepped inside. Lady Corinne. The noblewoman looked as polished as ever, her silver hair perfect, her expression carefully neutral. She studied Aerin like one might study a particularly interesting insect. "Well," Corinne said, "you certainly know how to make an entrance." Aerin didn't bother standing. "Come to gloat?" "Gloat?" Corinne's eyebrows rose. "My dear girl, I'm the only person in this entire palace who's thrilled about your current situation. No, I'm here to make you an offer." "I'm not interested." "You haven't heard it yet." Corinne moved closer, her heels clicking on stone. "Here's what I know. You're a blood weaver, which makes you valuable. Extraordinarily valuable. Every kingdom in the realm would pay a fortune to control someone with your abilities, or to see you dead so no one else can control you. Thanks for the recap. I'm offering you a third option." Corinne crouched down, meeting Aerin's eyes. "Work for me. Use your power in my service, and I'll get you out of this empire, set you up somewhere safe, somewhere you can actually live without a target on your back." "In exchange for what? My soul?" "In exchange for your loyalty." Corinne's smile was sharp. "I have enemies, Aerin. Powerful ones. Enemies who would be very inconvenienced if they suddenly developed fatal illnesses, or if their wounds stopped healing, or if their life force simply drained away." Aerin's stomach turned. "You want me to kill for you. I want you to survive. And the only way you survive this is by being useful to someone stronger than the king. Lucien is the strongest alpha alive." "Lucien is a fool in love." Corinne's voice turned cold. "He thinks he can protect you through sheer force of will, but force won't stop the other kingdoms from declaring war, won't stop his own court from turning on him. You're a liability, Aerin, a beautiful, dangerous liability, and eventually he'll realize that keeping you alive costs more than you're worth." The words hit harder than they should have, because part of Aerin wondered if Corinne was right, if Lucien's protection was just another form of control, and if she was kidding herself thinking she could survive in his world. "Think about it," Corinne said, standing. "You have 2 days left. 2 days to prove you're harmless, which we both know is impossible." Or you can take my offer and disappear before the executioner's blade finds your neck." She left, the door clanging shut behind her. Aerin sat in the darkness, Corinne's words echoing in her head, and tried to figure out which path led to survival, and which led to becoming the monster everyone already thought she was. On the sixth day, Lucien came. Aerin heard his footsteps first, heavier than the guards, more purposeful. Then the door opened, and he was there, filling the small space with his presence, his eyes blazing in the torchlight. "Get out!" he told the guards. They obeyed without question, and suddenly Aerin was alone with the king she'd almost married, the alpha who'd dragged her into this nightmare. "You look terrible," Lucien said. "Charming as always." Aerin stayed seated on the mattress, too tired to stand. "Come to tell me my time's almost up?" "I came to get you out." Lucien pulled a key from his pocket. "There's a passage at the back of this cell, leads out of the palace. I can have you across the border by dawn." Aerin stared at him. "You want me to run?" "I want you to live." Lucien's jaw was tight. "Castor's not going to let you walk free, Aerin. Even if you prove you can control your power, even if you pass whatever test he's devised, he'll find another reason to lock you up or kill you. Because he's scared. They're all scared. So your solution is for me to spend the rest of my life hiding? My solution is for you to survive." Lucien moved closer, crouching in front of her. "I made a mistake bringing you here. I thought I could protect you, thought the crown would shield you from the worst of the court. I was wrong. And now you're fixing your mistake by throwing me away? I'm fixing it by keeping you alive." His hands closed around hers, warm and rough. "Take the passage. Run. I'll send money, resources, everything you need to start over somewhere safe." Aerin looked down at their joined hands, at the calluses on his palms, the scars on his knuckles. She thought about running, about disappearing into some distant territory where no one knew her name or her power, and she realized she didn't want that. "No," she said. Lucien's grip tightened. "Aerin, I'm not running." Aerin pulled her hands free, standing up, forcing him to look up at her for once. "You brought me here, Lucien. You made me your queen, put a crown on my head, told the entire realm I belong to you, and now you want me to just vanish? Prove everyone right who said I was too weak, too scared, too nothing? This isn't about pride. It's exactly about pride." Aerin's voice cracked. "I've spent my entire life being told I wasn't enough, that I didn't matter. And for the first time I had a chance to be something, to mean something, and you want me to throw that away because it's hard, because people are scared?" Lucien stood, towering over her again, his expression twisted with frustration. "I want you to live, you stubborn fool. I want you to have a future that doesn't end with a blade in your back, or worse." "Why?" The question burst out of Aerin before she could stop it. "Why do you care so much? You said this was transactional, remember? Power and protection, no feelings, no attachments. So why are you here offering me an escape you'd never offer anyone else?" Lucien went very still. "Answer me," Aerin pressed. "Why does it matter to you if I live or die?" "Because," Lucien's voice was rough, strained, "because I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, Aerin. I've done terrible things to hold on to power, to keep this empire together. I've sacrificed people, destroyed lives, crushed anyone who stood in my way. And I don't regret most of it." He paused, something raw and painful crossing his face. "But you were supposed to be different. You were supposed to be the one thing I didn't ruin, the one choice that didn't end in blood and ashes. And if you die because of me, because I dragged you into this world—" He stopped, his hands clenching into fists. "I can't. I won't let that happen." Aerin's heart was hammering. She'd never heard Lucien sound like this, vulnerable, almost desperate. This was the man behind the crown, behind the cold Alpha King, and he was terrified. "Then help me fight," she said quietly. "Don't throw me away because it's easier. Help me prove I'm not a monster. Help me survive this the right way." "There is no right way, but then we make one." Aerin stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating off him. "You're the most powerful alpha alive, Lucien. If anyone can change the rules, it's you, so change them. For me." Lucien stared at her, and for a long moment, Aerin thought he might agree. thought she saw something shift in his eyes, some decision being made. Then his face went blank, and he stepped back. "I can't," he said. "The risk is too great." "Risk to who? Me? Or you?" "To everyone." Lucien turned toward the door. "I'll leave the key. Use the passage or don't, that's your choice. But don't expect me to watch you die for a crown that was never really yours to begin with." He left before she could respond. Aerin stood alone in the cell, the key glinting on the floor where he'd dropped it, and felt something inside her chest crack open. Not her heart, that was already broken. Something deeper. Something that had been buried and suppressed and locked away for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Rage. Pure, crystalline, absolute rage. At Lucien, for bringing her here and then abandoning her. At Castor, for using fear to control her fate. At the entire court, for judging her before they knew what she could do. At her old pack, for sealing her power and forcing her to live as half of what she was. At herself, for being scared for so long. The power inside her stirred, responding to the rage, feeding on it. Aerin felt it building, growing, demanding to be released. And for the first time since discovering what she was, she didn't try to push it down. She let it rise. Light blazed from her hands, not gentle healing light, but something fiercer, hotter, like touching the sun. The walls of the cell glowed, the air crackling with energy. Aerin gasped, trying to control it, but the power had its own will now. It wanted out, wanted to burn, to destroy, to prove that she was more than just a scared Omega pretending to be queen. She was dangerous. And maybe it was time everyone remembered that. The light exploded outward, shattering the door, sending stone fragments flying. Alarms screamed through the vault, footsteps pounded toward her cell. Aerin stood in the wreckage, power still crackling around her hands, and smiled. Let them come. She was done hiding. Guards poured into the corridor, weapons drawn, faces white with terror. They stopped dead when they saw her standing in the wreckage of her cell, light still crackling around her fingers like captured lightning. "Stand down," one of them shouted, though his voice shook. "By order of Lord Castor, stand down and—" Aerin raised her hand. The guard's words choked off as his own life force responded to her will. Not draining, not killing, just pausing. His heart stuttered, his breath caught, and for 3 terrible seconds he couldn't move. Then Aerin released him, and he collapsed against the wall, gasping. "I'm not your prisoner anymore," she said quietly, "and I'm not running. So if you want to stop me, you'll have to kill me, otherwise get out of my way." The guards looked at each other, calculating odds, weighing orders against self-preservation. She could see the moment they decided, not to fight, but to retreat. They backed away slowly, weapons still raised but making no move to attack. Smart. Aerin walked past them, power still humming through her veins, and climbed the stairs out of the vault. She had no plan, no destination except up and out, away from the dark and the fear and the cage they'd tried to build around her. She emerged into a servant's corridor, empty at this hour, lit by oil lamps that flickered as she passed. Her reflection caught in a polished mirror. Wild-haired, dress torn, eyes glowing with residual power. She looked like everything they'd accused her of being, a monster, an abomination, a weapon. Good. Let them see what they created. Aerin followed the corridors by instinct, her wolf senses guiding her toward the main palace. She could hear voices ahead, shouts, and running footsteps as word spread that the Bloodweaver had escaped. Alarms rang through the halls, and somewhere in the distance she heard Castor's voice bellowing orders. She rounded a corner and came face to face with Commander Thane. The old warrior stood alone in the hallway, arms crossed, his scarred face unreadable. Behind him, the corridor split, left toward the throne room, right toward the palace entrance. "So," Thane said, "you broke out." "I did." "Well, going to kill everyone who gets in your way?" Aerin paused, the power still coiled in her hands, ready to be used. "Do I need to?" Thane studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "Hell of a thing, watching you fight in training. Always thought you had something extra in you. Didn't know it was this." "Are you going to stop me?" "Depends. Where are you headed?" "To the throne room. To face Castor and whoever else thinks they can judge me." "That's suicide," Thane said flatly. Castor's got 50 armed men up there, and they're scared enough to shoot first and ask questions never. Then I'll heal myself after they shoot me. Can you do that? Honestly, Aerin had no idea, but she wasn't about to admit it. Only one way to find out. Thane laughed, a rough, genuine sound. You've got guts, girl. I'll give you that. He stepped aside, clearing the path to the throne room. Go ahead, but for what it's worth, I hope you survive. You're more interesting than half the nobles up there. Aerin nodded once and moved past him, her heart pounding, but her steps steady. The throne room doors stood open, light spilling out into the hallway. Aerin could hear voices inside, casters and others she didn't recognize. She paused just outside, gathering herself, letting the power settle into something she could control instead of something that controlled her. Then she walked through the doors. The room fell silent. Castor stood at the center with his soldiers flanking him, weapons drawn. The court had gathered too, nobles pressed against the walls, as far from the action as they could get. And on the throne, watching with an expression like carved stone, sat Lucy Yen. His eyes met hers, and something flickered across his face. Relief, or anger, or fear, she couldn't tell. Aerin Vale, Castor said, his voice carrying through the hall. You were ordered to remain confined. Breaking out is an act of aggression against this court, against your king. I don't care what you think it is, Aerin interrupted. She walked forward, and Castor's soldiers shifted nervously. You gave me 7 days to prove I'm not a threat. I'm done waiting, so here I am. Test me. Test you? Castor's face twisted. You just destroyed a reinforced cell and assaulted my guards. You've proven exactly what I suspected. You can't be controlled. I proved I won't be caged like an animal. Aerin stopped a dozen feet from him, close enough to be threatening, far enough to give him space to back down. There's a difference. Is there? Castor gestured to his men. Look at yourself. You're glowing with power you barely understand, power that's killed entire bloodlines in the past. And you expect us to just, what? Trust that you won't lose control? That you won't turn that power against us? I don't expect you to trust me, Aerin said. I expect you to give me a chance to show you what I can actually do, not what you're afraid I might do. What I can do right now with witnesses. Murmurs rippled through the court. Castor's expression shifted, calculating. What are you proposing? He asked carefully. A demonstration. Aerin raised her hands, letting the power glow visibly around her fingers. You want to know if I can control this? Fine. Bring me your wounded, your sick. Anyone in this palace who's suffering, anyone the healers can't help. Let me try to heal them. If I lose control, if I hurt anyone, you can execute me on the spot. The room erupted into whispers. Castor looked uncertain for the first time since she'd met him. And if you succeed, he asked, then you stop treating me like a weapon and start treating me like a person. Aerin's voice hardened. You accept that I'm queen, that Lucian chose me, and you deal with it. No more assassination attempts. No more coups. Just let me live. That's not your decision to make, a voice called from the crowd. Lady Corinne stepped forward, her face pale but determined. The old laws are clear. Blood weavers cannot be allowed to exist freely. They're too dangerous, too... The old laws were written by people who were scared, Aerin cut her off. Scared of power they didn't understand, couldn't control. But I'm standing here, offering to prove that fear is wrong. So either take my offer or kill me now. Those are your options. Silence crashed down over the throne room. Then Lucien stood. Every eye turned to him as he descended from the throne, his presence commanding absolute attention. He walked past Castor, past his soldiers, until he stood directly in front of Aerin. You should have run, he said quietly, for her ears only. I know. This is reckless, dangerous. You could die. I was going to die anyway. Aerin met his gaze. At least this way, I die on my terms. Something shifted in Lucian's expression, that same crack she'd seen in the cell, widening. Then he turned to address the court. Bring the wounded, he ordered. Every soldier, every servant, everyone in this palace who's injured or ill, will see what she can do. Castor looked like he wanted to argue, but even he couldn't refuse a direct command from the king. He nodded sharply, and soldiers scattered to carry out the order. Within minutes, they started arriving. The first was a young guard who'd been mauled by a rogue wolf during border patrol, his arm shredded, hanging useless, the healers unable to save it. They'd been planning to amputate. Aerin knelt beside him, her hands hovering over the ruined flesh. Up close, she could see the damage, torn muscle, shattered bone, infection creeping in. The healers were right. This arm was dead, unless she could bring it back. "This is going to hurt," she told the guard, "but try not to move." He nodded, teeth gritted. Aerin placed her hands on his arm and let the power flow. It was different from the small healings she'd practiced in her cell. This was massive, complex, trying to rebuild something that nature had already given up on. She felt the power dig deep, searching for living tissue, finding the threads of life force still clinging to damaged cells. And then, slowly, she started to weave them back together. Light blazed from her hands, brighter than before, almost blinding. The guard screamed, his body arching, but Aerin held on. She could feel muscle knitting, bone fusing, infection burning away under the force of pure life energy. It was working. The crowd gasped as the guard's arm began to heal, not just seal over, but actually regenerate. Torn flesh smoothed, bones straightened, color returned to gray skin. After 5 excruciating minutes, Aerin pulled back. The guard's arm was whole. He stared at it, flexing fingers that hadn't moved in weeks, tears streaming down his face. "I can feel it," he whispered. "I can feel everything." The throne room erupted into stunned silence. Then another injured person was brought forward, and another, and another. Aerin worked through them all, a servant with a degenerative illness the healers couldn't cure, a soldier with a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding, a child with a fever that had lasted for months. One by one, she poured power into them, feeling the life force respond, watching bodies heal in ways that should have been impossible. Each healing took something from her. She could feel her own energy draining, her hands starting to shake, exhaustion creeping in. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. This was her chance to prove she wasn't a monster, and she'd work herself to death before she let it slip away. The 11th person brought before her was different, an old woman carried on a stretcher, her breathing shallow and labored. Aerin could feel the wrongness in her even from a distance. Not an injury or an infection, but something deeper, something fundamental. "What's wrong with her?" Aerin asked. "Old age," Castor said quietly. He'd been watching every healing with increasing fascination and unease. "She's dying, has been for weeks. The healers say there's nothing to be done." Aerin looked at the woman's face, peaceful, resigned, ready, and she realized what Castor was really asking. Could she reverse death itself? Should she? "No," Aerin said, stepping back. I'm not. This isn't something I can heal, shouldn't heal." "Why not?" Castor pressed. "You've healed everything else. Surely stopping death is within your power." "Power doesn't mean I should use it." Aerin looked at the old woman, at the natural end of a life fully lived. "There's a difference between healing and controlling, between saving a life and refusing to let it end. If I cross that line," she shook her head, "I become exactly what you're afraid of." The room was utterly silent. Then the old woman on the stretcher spoke, her voice thin but clear. "Wise child, let me go in peace." Castor stared at Aerin, something like respect flickering across his hard features. "Take her back to her rooms," he ordered the attendants. "Make her comfortable." They carried the old woman away, and Aerin felt the weight of every eye in the room. 11 healings, Castor said. 11 people who would have died or lived as cripples. You've saved more lives in one night than most healers manage in a lifetime. He paused. And you chose not to overstep, even when you could have. That's the point, Aerin said. Her voice was hoarse, her hands still trembling from exhaustion. I'm not trying to be all-powerful. I'm trying to be useful, trying to prove I can live among you without destroying everything. Castor looked at Lucien, then back at Aerin. You've proven it, at least to me. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, not universal, but enough to matter. Lady Corinne stepped forward, her face twisted with fury. This proves nothing. She's shown she can heal, yes, but what about the other applications of Bloodweaver power? What about the ability to drain life, to kill with a touch, to what? Aerin interrupted. To do exactly what every other wolf in this room is capable of? You can all kill. I've watched you train, fight, tear each other apart over territory and power. The only difference is I'm honest about what I can do. The difference, Corinne hissed, is that you're too dangerous to be controlled. No. Lucian's voice cut through the argument like a blade. The difference is that you're scared, and fear makes you stupid. He moved to stand beside Aerin, his presence a wall of authority. Aerin has done what I asked. She's proven she can control her power, that she can use it to help instead of harm, and she's shown more restraint in one night than most of you have shown in your entire lives. He looked at Castor. Is this settled? Castor studied Aerin for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. It's settled. As far as I'm concerned, she's passed the test. She can be queen. Relief crashed through Aerin so hard her knees nearly buckled, but she locked them, kept herself upright, kept her expression neutral. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. Castor's expression was grim. You've proven yourself to me and to this court. But there are other kingdoms, other powers, who won't be so easily convinced. When word spreads that the Northern Empire has a Bloodweaver queen, he shook his head. You've bought yourself survival tonight. But the real fight is just beginning. He turned and walked away, his soldiers following, leaving Aerin standing in the throne room with Lucian and the remnants of the court. Slowly, the nobles began to disperse, whispering among themselves. Some looked at her with fear still, but others looked curious, interested, like she was a puzzle they wanted to solve instead of a threat they needed to eliminate. It wasn't acceptance. Not yet. But it was a start. Finally, only Lucian remained. You're an idiot, he said. Aerin laughed, a short, exhausted sound. You already said that. It bears repeating. Lucian stepped closer, his eyes searching her face. You could have died tonight, multiple times, and you still came here, still offered yourself up like— He stopped, his jaw tight, like you had something to prove. I did have something to prove. To who? Them? Lucian gestured at the empty throne room. They don't deserve your sacrifice, Aerin. They'd have watched you burn and called it justice. I wasn't proving it to them. Aerin met his gaze. I was proving it to myself, that I'm more than just a broken Omega someone threw away, that I can be powerful and still be good, that I can survive in your world without losing everything that makes me human. Lucian went very still. And did you? Prove it? I think so. Aerin's hands were still glowing faintly, the last remnants of power fading. I healed people tonight, Lucian. Actually helped them. For the first time in my life, I did something that mattered. Something that saved lives instead of just existing. She looked down at her hands, at the light dying in her palms. I'm not scared of this power anymore, she said quietly. I'm scared of what happens if I don't use it. If I let fear turn me into someone small and hidden and useless. When she looked up, Lucian was staring at her with an expression she'd never seen before, raw and unguarded and almost awed. You're going to change everything, he said. You know that, right? The entire realm, every kingdom, every pack, they're all going to look at you and realize the old rules don't work anymore. That power doesn't have to mean destruction, that someone like you can exist and the world doesn't end. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Lucien's mouth curved into something that might have been a real smile. I have no idea. But I'm starting to think it might be the best thing that's ever happened to this empire. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing over her skin with unexpected gentleness. Aerin's breath caught. This was the closest they'd been since the night he'd offered her the crown. Close enough to feel his warmth, to see the silver in his eyes go molten. You terrify me, Lucian said softly. Not because of your power, because of what you make me want to do. What do you want to do? His thumb traced her lower lip. Things that would break every rule I've set for myself. Things that would make me vulnerable in ways I swore I'd never be again. Aerin's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear her own voice. Like what? Lucian leaned in, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her skin. Like keep you. Not as a political ally or a useful tool, just keep you. Because the thought of you leaving, of going somewhere I can't reach, makes me want to burn the entire realm down to stop it. Lucian, I know. He pulled back, the moment shattering. I know it's not fair to you. You didn't sign up for this. For me being... He stopped, his jaw working. For me being whatever I am. In love with me? Aerin's voice was barely a whisper. Lucien went absolutely still. For a long moment, he didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe. Then he said, yes. The word hung between them like a confession and a curse. I didn't plan it, Lucien continued, his voice rough. Didn't want it. Falling in love was never part of the agreement. But somewhere between watching you stand up to the court and seeing you walk into an assassin's blade without flinching and listening to you refuse to run when any sane person would have... He stopped. Somewhere in there, I stopped being able to imagine a world where you weren't in it. Aerin felt tears prick her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the sheer overwhelming weight of hearing the most powerful alpha alive admit he was vulnerable. Admit he needed her. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything. Lucian stepped back, putting distance between them. I'm not asking for reciprocation, Aerin. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know, before... He stopped. Before what? Lucian's expression went carefully blank. Before everything changes. Because it will, after tonight. The other kingdoms will hear about you, about what you can do, and they'll come. With armies or assassins or treaties designed to trap you, and I won't be able to protect you from all of it. Then we protect each other, Aerin said. Lucien looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. You still want to stay? After everything, you still want this life? I want a life where I matter, Aerin said, where I'm not just surviving, but actually living. And if that means fighting kingdoms and assassins and whatever else comes... She squared her shoulders. Then that's what I'll do. With you, if you'll have me. Or alone, if that's what it takes. For a moment, Lucien just stared at her. Then he moved, closing the distance between them in 2 strides, and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and fierce, and full of everything he'd been holding back, fear and need, and a hunger that had nothing to do with power and everything to do with connection. Aerin kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer, pouring every ounce of defiance and strength and stubborn hope into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucien rested his forehead against hers again. I'm keeping you, he said. No negotiations, no escape clauses. You're mine, and I'm yours, and anyone who tries to change that can go straight to hell. Aerin laughed, breathless and exhilarated. Is that your idea of a romantic declaration? It's the best you're getting from me. I'll take it. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, the throne room empty and silent around them. Then Lucien pulled back, his expression turning serious. We need to prepare. Castor was right. The other kingdoms will react badly to this news. We have maybe a week before the threats start arriving. Then we use the week, Aerin said. Train me properly. Not just combat, but politics, strategy, everything I need to survive in this world. Turn me into someone they can't dismiss. You already are. Then let's make sure they know it. Lucy Cien smiled, a real smile this time, sharp and dangerous and full of promise. Together then. Together, Aerin agreed. And for the first time since walking away from her old pack, since accepting Lucy Cien's offer, since discovering what she really was, Aerin felt like she might actually have a chance, not just to survive, but to win. The threats arrived exactly 6 days later. Aerin had spent every waking hour preparing, training with Thane until her muscles screamed, studying treaty law with Elder Matthias, who'd grudgingly agreed to teach her, learning the intricate dance of court politics from advisors who still looked at her like she might explode. And through it all, Lucien had been there, pushing her harder, expecting more, refusing to let her settle for anything less than excellence. She'd fallen into bed each night too exhausted to think, and woken each morning with new bruises and a growing confidence that maybe, just maybe, she could actually do this. Then the ambassadors arrived. 5 kingdoms sent representatives, not to negotiate, but to deliver ultimatums. They gathered in the throne room with their entourages, their armed guards, their barely concealed hostility. Aerin sat beside Lucien on the smaller throne, wearing the crown that still felt too heavy, and watched them file in like vultures circling a corpse. Ambassador Torvin from the eastern reaches spoke first, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "Your Majesties, my king sends his congratulations on your recent union. However, he feels compelled to express certain concerns regarding the Queen's unique heritage." "Concerns?" Lucien repeated, his voice flat. "How diplomatic." "The existence of a bloodweaver poses a threat to the stability of the realm," Torvin continued. "My king suggests, respectfully of course, that Queen Aerin be placed under joint supervision. A council of kingdoms, all working together to ensure her power is properly contained and—" "Contained?" Aerin interrupted. "You mean imprisoned?" Torvin's smile didn't waver. "Monitored, Your Majesty, for everyone's safety." "And if we refuse?" Lucien asked. "Then my king will have no choice but to consider the Northern Empire a hostile threat." Torvin's smile turned sharp. "Along with the 4 other kingdoms represented here today. I believe that constitutes a sufficient alliance to encourage cooperation." The other ambassadors nodded, a united front of thinly veiled threats. Aerin felt Lucien tense beside her, felt the rage radiating off him like heat. But before he could speak, she placed her hand on his arm, a gentle pressure, a silent message. "Let me handle this." Lucien glanced at her, surprised, then gave the slightest nod. Aerin stood, and the room went quiet. 5 ambassadors, their guards, the entire court, all watching to see what the Bloodweaver Queen would do. "You're right to be concerned," Aerin said, her voice carrying through the hall. "My power is dangerous, unprecedented, the kind of thing that could reshape the balance of power in this realm." Torvin's expression turned smug. "Then you agree?" "I agree that you're terrified," Aerin continued. "Terrified of what I represent. Not because I'm actually threatening you, but because I'm something you can't control through the usual methods. You can't bribe me, can't intimidate me, can't marry me off to secure an alliance. So you're trying to cage me before I realize how much power I actually have." "Your Majesty?" "I'm not finished." Aerin's voice hardened. "Here's what I'm offering instead. Each of your kingdoms can send 1 representative, someone injured, someone sick, someone your healers have given up on. Bring them here. Let me try to heal them. If I succeed, you go home and tell your kings that the Bloodweaver Queen is an asset, not a threat. If I fail, or if I harm anyone, you can have your counsel, your containment, whatever you want." Silence crashed down over the throne room. Torvin's smile had vanished. "You're proposing to heal our wounded? As what? A demonstration of goodwill?" "I'm proposing to prove I'm useful," Aerin said, "that I can do things no one else in this realm can do, and that maybe, instead of trying to destroy me out of fear, you should consider what we could accomplish if we worked together." The ambassadors looked at each other, uncertain. This wasn't what they'd expected, not threats or defiance, but an offer, a chance to gain something instead of just preventing a loss. "My king would need assurances," one of the other ambassadors said slowly. "Guarantees that you won't use your power against us." "Then we'll write them into a treaty," Lucien said, standing beside Aerin. "Formal agreements, binding contracts, whatever makes you feel safe. But understand this. You came here to threaten my queen, to treat her like a weapon that needs to be locked away. That ends now." His eyes blazed silver, his presence overwhelming. "Aerin is offering you a gift, the chance to see what she can actually do, to witness her power used for healing instead of harm. You can accept that gift, or you can leave. But if you choose to make her an enemy," Lucien's smile was cold, "then you'll learn exactly why I'm called the most dangerous alpha alive." The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. Finally, Ambassador Torvin nodded. "We'll send word to our kings. Arrange for the wounded to be brought here. But if this is a trick—" "It's not," Aerin said. "I give you my word." "The word of a bloodweaver," Torvin muttered. But he bowed, stiff and grudging, and led his delegation out. When the throne room was empty again, Lucien turned to Aerin. "That was reckless. That was necessary. Aerin sank back onto her throne, exhaustion hitting her like a wave. If we'd refused, we'd be at war within a month. At least this buys us time, gives them a reason to hesitate before attacking. Or it gives them a chance to study you, learn your weaknesses. Then we'll have to make sure I don't have any. Lucien looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then he said, "You're getting good at this. The politics, the negotiations, too good. Is that a problem?" It's terrifying. But he was almost smiling. Come on. If you're going to heal representatives from 5 kingdoms, you need to be at full strength, which means rest, food, and no training with Thane for at least 12 hours. Thane's going to be furious. Thane can handle it. They left the throne room together, and Aerin tried not to think about how easily they moved as a unit now, how natural it felt to have Lucien beside her, anticipating her needs, supporting her choices, how much it would hurt if she lost him. 3 days later, the wounded arrived. Each kingdom sent someone different: a soldier with a shattered spine, a child with a degenerative illness, a noblewoman slowly going blind, a merchant who'd lost both legs in an accident, a healer whose hands had been destroyed by frostbite. 5 impossible cases, 5 people who'd been written off as beyond saving. They gathered in the palace's grand healing hall, a room designed for medical ceremonies, with high windows and tables arranged in a circle. Representatives from each kingdom watched from the gallery above, witnesses to whatever would happen next. Aerin stood in the center, her hands already glowing faintly with power, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. "Remember," Lucien murmured, standing close enough that only she could hear, "you don't have to save all of them. Even one success is enough to prove your point." "I'm not trying to prove a point anymore," Aerin said quietly. "I'm trying to save their lives." She started with the child. A girl, maybe 8 years old, her body wasting away from an illness that had baffled every healer who'd examined her. Aerin knelt beside her, placing gentle hands on the girl's frail shoulders. "What's your name?" Aerin asked. "Lily?" the girl whispered. "Okay, Lily, I'm going to try to help you. It might feel strange, but I promise it won't hurt. Can you be brave for me?" Lily nodded, her eyes huge and trusting. Aerin closed her eyes and let the power flow. Immediately she felt the wrongness, not an infection or injury, but something deeper. The girl's own life force was turning against her, attacking healthy cells, slowly consuming her from the inside out. An autoimmune disease, something no conventional healer could fix because the enemy was the body itself. But Aerin wasn't a conventional healer. She dove deeper, finding the threads of corrupted energy, the places where the life force had gone twisted and wrong. And slowly, carefully, she began to untangle them, redirecting the attacking energy, teaching it to recognize friend from foe, rebuilding the internal balance that kept a body alive. It was delicate work, like diffusing a bomb while blindfolded. One wrong move and she could make it worse, could accelerate the disease instead of curing it. Sweat beaded on Aerin's forehead. Her hands shook with the effort of maintaining control. But gradually, she felt the girl's life force stabilize, felt the attack stop, the corrupted energy dissipate. The body began to heal itself the way it was supposed to. When Aerin opened her eyes, Lily was sitting up, color returning to her cheeks, her breathing steady and strong. "I feel better," the girl said, wonder in her voice. "Mama, I feel better." Her mother rushed forward from the gallery, tears streaming down her face, gathering her daughter into her arms. The Eastern Reach's ambassador watched with an expression that might have been awe. Aerin didn't give herself time to celebrate. She moved to the next patient. The soldier with the shattered spine was harder. The damage was old, the nerves dead or dying, the body having adapted to paralysis. But Aerin worked through it, forcing new growth, rebuilding connections that had been severed, bringing life back to tissue that had given up. By the time she finished, the soldier was weeping, his legs moving for the first time in 3 years. The noblewoman's blindness took precision, repairing delicate eye tissue, restoring nerve pathways, clearing away scarring. The merchant's missing legs required something different entirely, not healing what was there, but encouraging the body to regenerate what had been lost. It was slow, exhausting work, and Aerin could only manage to restore partial function. But it was enough. The merchant could walk again, even if he'd need a cane. The healer's frostbitten hands were last, and by that point Aerin was running on fumes. Her own energy was nearly depleted, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold them steady. But she pushed through, restoring feeling to numb fingers, bringing warmth back to frozen tissue. When she finally pulled back, all 5 patients were improved. Not all perfectly healed, she wasn't a miracle worker, despite what her powers suggested, but all of them better than they'd been. All of them given back some piece of the life they'd lost. Aerin collapsed to her knees, her vision swimming, her entire body screaming with exhaustion. Lucien was there instantly, catching her before she hit the floor. "Enough! You've done enough." "Did it work?" Aerin's voice was barely a whisper. "See for yourself." Aerin lifted her head and saw the gallery above. The ambassadors were standing, staring down at the healed patients with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to something that might have been hope. Ambassador Torvin cleared his throat. "This is unprecedented." "This is what she can do," Lucien said, his arms still supporting Aerin. "This is why she's not a threat. She's a resource, something the realm hasn't had in centuries." "She's exhausted herself," one of the other ambassadors observed. "Used so much power she can barely stand. What happens if someone attacks while she's vulnerable like this?" "Then they deal with me," Lucien said coldly. "And I promise you, that's not a fight anyone wants." Torvin studied them both for a long moment. Then he said, "I'll send word to my king. Recommend that we negotiate a treaty instead of a containment protocol, but I can't speak for the other kingdoms." One by one, the other ambassadors nodded. Cautious agreements hedged with conditions and concerns. But agreements nonetheless. It was enough. Lucien carried Aerin back to her chambers, laying her gently on the bed. She was too tired to protest, too drained to do anything but close her eyes and let the darkness take her. She woke hours later to find Lucien sitting in a chair beside the bed, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "How long was I out?" Aerin asked, her voice rough. 6 hours. Lucien leaned forward. "How do you feel?" "Like I got trampled by a herd of elephants." Aerin tried to sit up, wincing. "But alive, that's something." "Well, you nearly killed yourself today," Lucien said quietly. "Pushed yourself past every safe limit trying to prove a point." "I was saving lives. You were magnificent." The words stopped Aerin cold. Lucien's eyes were intense, burning, and terrifying, and I've never been more proud or more scared in my entire life. Aerin didn't know what to say to that. "The ambassadors left an hour ago," Lucien continued. "All 5 kingdoms are willing to negotiate. No war, no containment, just treaties. Trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, the boring political nonsense that keeps empires running. You did it, Aerin. You bought us peace." "For now," Aerin said. "Until the next crisis, the next threat." "Maybe." Lucien reached out, taking her hand. "But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, we celebrate the fact that you're alive, you're safe, and you just changed the course of history." His hand was warm in hers, solid and real. Aerin squeezed it, feeling emotion well up in her chest, relief and pride, and something deeper that she wasn't ready to name. "Lucien," she said quietly, "when you told me you loved me, did you mean it?" He went very still. "Yes. Even knowing what I am, what I can do. Especially knowing that." Lucien's thumb traced circles on her palm. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Aerin. Not because of your power, but because of how you choose to use it. You could have let fear turn you into a weapon. Instead, you became a healer. You could have let anger make you cruel. Instead, you chose compassion. He stopped, his jaw working. "I'm what?" Aerin prompted. "Everything I didn't know I needed," Lucien finished. "Everything I've been missing without realizing it. And the thought of losing you, of watching you destroy yourself trying to save everyone else," his grip tightened. "It's the only thing that scares me anymore." Aerin felt tears prick her eyes. She'd spent so long being told she wasn't enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't worth protecting. Hearing Lucien, the most powerful alpha alive, admit that she was essential to him, that he feared losing her, it broke something open inside her chest. "I love you too," she whispered. Lucien's breath caught. "Aerin, I didn't want to," she continued, the words tumbling out. I tried not to. Tried to keep this transactional, keep my heart safe. But somewhere between you dragging me to this empire and watching you fight for me and seeing you be terrified and still standing beside me. She squeezed his hand. I fell, hard, and I don't know how to unfall. For a moment, Lucien just stared at her. Then he leaned forward and kissed her, soft and desperate, and full of every emotion they'd both been holding back. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucien rested his forehead against hers. Promise me something, he said. What? Promise me you won't sacrifice yourself, won't burn out your power trying to save the entire world. Because I need you alive, Aerin. I need you here, with me, being selfish and human and mine. I promise, Aerin said, as long as you promise to stop trying to handle everything alone, to let me stand beside you as an actual partner, not just a political asset. Deal. They kissed again, slower this time, and Aerin felt something settle inside her chest, something that felt like home. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, the rest of the world temporarily forgotten. Then Lucien's body went rigid. Aerin pulled back, alarmed. What's wrong? Lucien's face had gone gray, his breathing shallow. He clutched at his chest, his eyes wide with shock and pain. Lucien? Aerin's voice rose in panic. Lucien, what? He collapsed forward, and Aerin caught him, barely keeping him from hitting the floor. His skin was ice cold, his heartbeat erratic. Guards! Aerin screamed. Someone get Dr. Venn now! But even as she shouted, she could feel it. Something wrong in Lucien's life force. Not an injury, not an illness. Something deeper, something ancient and malicious. A curse. Dr. Venn arrived within minutes, his face grim as he examined Lucien. Get him to the bed. Aerin helped lift Lucien onto the mattress, her hands shaking, her mind racing. This didn't make sense. Lucien had been fine moments ago, and now he was dying right in front of her. What's happening to him? Aerin demanded. Venn's expression was grave. There's an old curse on the Varric bloodline, one I'd hoped was just legend. What kind of curse? If a king of House Varric falls in love, truly, deeply in love, the curse activates. Venn looked at Aerin. It freezes him from the inside out, slowly stealing his life force until there's nothing left. Aerin's world tilted. That's not possible. Curses like that don't exist. They do if they're old enough, powerful enough. Venn pulled back, his face ashen. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. There's nothing conventional medicine can do. Then I'll do something unconventional. Aerin pushed past him, kneeling beside Lucien. His skin was turning blue, frost spreading across his lips. Aerin, Lucien managed, his voice weak. Don't. It's too dangerous. Shut up. Aerin placed her hands on his chest, calling up every ounce of power she had left. I didn't become a blood weaver just to watch you die because you loved me. She dove into his life force, searching for the curse, and she found it. Ancient magic, coiled around his heart like a serpent, draining his energy, turning his blood to ice. Aerin had never seen anything like it, never tried to break a curse before. But she was going to try now. She wrapped her power around the curse, trying to pull it free. But it fought back, digging deeper, tightening its grip. Every time she loosened one coil, two more took its place. It's not working, Dr. Venn said from somewhere far away. I know. Aerin gritted her teeth, pouring more power into the fight. Her own life force was dangerously low, her hands shaking violently. But she refused to give up. There had to be a way. There was always a way. She pushed deeper, past the curse, down into the very foundation of Lucien's life force. And there she found something unexpected. A seal. Old magic, buried in his bloodline for generations, placed there deliberately, to hide something. Aerin hesitated for only a second. Then she broke the seal. Power exploded outward. Lucien's power, locked away since childhood, suddenly freed. It surged through him like a tidal wave, burning away the curse, shattering the ice, reclaiming territory the dark magic had stolen. Lucien gasped, his back arching, his eyes blazing silver white. The curse screamed, an actual sound like metal tearing, and then it shattered into nothing. Lucien collapsed back onto the bed, breathing hard, color returning to his skin. Aerin pulled back, her vision swimming, her entire body trembling with exhaustion. She'd burned through everything she had left, was running on fumes and stubborn will. "Did it work?" she whispered. "It worked," Ven breathed, checking Lucien's pulse. "The curse is gone. Completely gone." Lucien opened his eyes, staring up at Aerin with wonder and disbelief. "What did you do?" "I broke the seal on your power," Aerin said. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "There was magic locked inside you, hidden. I think whoever placed the curse also sealed away the only thing that could break it, your own strength." "That's insane," Lucien said. But he was sitting up now, stronger with every passing second. "Who would do that?" "Someone who wanted your bloodline controllable," Aerin said. The room was starting to spin. "Someone who feared what you could become if you accessed your full power." "Aerin," Lucien's hands cupped her face. "You're burning up." "I'm fine," Aerin lied. Then the world went black. When Aerin woke, 3 days had passed. She learned this from the nurses who'd been watching over her, from the concerned looks on their faces when she finally opened her eyes. She'd burned herself out completely, pushed past every limit, and her body had shut down to protect itself. Lucien had barely left her side. He was there when she woke, sitting in the chair beside her bed, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "You're awake," he said, relief flooding his voice. "You're alive," Aerin countered. Her throat was dry, her voice raspy. "Because of you." Lucien moved to sit on the edge of the bed. "You broke a centuries-old curse, Aerin. Something every healer in my family's history said was impossible." "I'm stubborn like that." Lucien laughed. A real laugh, warm and unguarded. "Yes, you are." He took her hand, threading their fingers together. "While you were unconscious, something happened. The seal you broke. It didn't just free my power. It freed information, memories that had been buried in my bloodline." "What kind of memories?" "The curse wasn't placed by an enemy," Lucien said quietly. "It was placed by my ancestor. The same one who founded House Varric. He did it deliberately, as a safeguard." Aerin frowned. "Against what?" "Against someone like you." Lucien's eyes met hers. "The legend says that a Varric king would one day fall in love with a bloodweaver, and together they'd have the power to reshape the entire realm, not through conquest or force, but through healing, through changing the very nature of what it means to be an alpha." He paused. "My ancestor was terrified of that, terrified of losing control, of the old ways being destroyed. So he placed the curse, ensuring that if a king ever fell in love with a bloodweaver, he'd die before they could change anything. And he sealed the counter curse inside the bloodline itself, gambling that no one would ever be powerful enough to find it." "But I did," Aerin said slowly. "You did." Lucien squeezed her hand, "which means we're free. Free from the curse, from the fear, from the chains his paranoia placed on us. We can be together, build something new, change the realm the way we want to, not the way we're forced to." Aerin felt tears slip down her cheeks. "Together." "Together," Lucien agreed. He leaned down, kissing her softly. "My queen, my bloodweaver, my everything." 6 months later, Aerin stood on the balcony overlooking the northern capital, watching the sun set over a city that had become home. So much had changed. The treaties with the 5 kingdoms had been signed, creating an alliance built on mutual benefit instead of mutual fear. Aerin had trained a dozen healers in basic bloodweaver techniques, not the full power, but enough to save lives that would have been lost. The court had slowly, grudgingly accepted her, realizing that a queen who could heal was more valuable than one who could simply look pretty and produce heirs. And she was pregnant. 3 months along, barely showing, but already she could feel the life growing inside her. A child who would carry both Varric and bloodweaver blood, who would inherit power that had never existed before. Lucien wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hand settling over her still flat stomach. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far we've come," Aerin said. "How unlikely any of this was." "You mean how you went from rejected Omega to queen of the most powerful empire in the realm?" "Something like that," Aerin leaned back against him. Do you ever regret it? Choosing me that night? Never. Lucien's voice was firm. You're the best decision I've ever made, even when you're being stubborn and reckless and terrifying. I learned from the best. They stood like that, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Aerin thought about the girl she'd been, broken, rejected, convinced she was worthless. That girl was gone. In her place stood a queen, a blood weaver, a woman who'd rewritten the rules of an entire realm and survived everything they'd thrown at her. And she was just getting started. I love you, Lucien murmured against her hair. I love you too, Aerin said, now and always. Below them, the city lights began to flicker on, one by one, until the capital glowed like a constellation brought to Earth. And in that moment, Aerin knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Not because fate had chosen her, but because she'd chosen herself. And that made all the difference.